Thank you so much for that. I really appreciate that. Great welcome. As Christina said, my name is John Ostermiller, and I am a master's candidate at the University of San Francisco's Masters of Asia-Pacific Studies program. My background, in case you didn't know, a little bit about me, wearing a funny hat from Japan. I am an alumni of American River College and California State University, Sacramento. Both programs I took were in anthropology, so I graduated with honors from this fine institution and from our local state university. I am a master's candidate at the University of San Francisco at the Asia Pacific Studies program. My research interests include nationalism, popular culture, East Asia, and public scholarship. And when I talk about public scholarship, kind of the thing I mean is what I'm doing right now, but also public outreach. So if we think of people like Neil deGrasse Tyson, who work with the public, who are public researchers, public figures, who can contribute to these conversations and kind of help deal with some of the interesting changes in our national policy and our public perceptions and our public discussions about things like, what does it mean to be American? What does it mean to be conservative or liberal or strong? And part of this can mean having different relationships with other people, with foreign countries, with different cultures. I have taken 2 trips to Japan. My first was in 2012 to Hiroshima during their Hiroshima and Peace program. It's a 2-week intensive course in southeastern Japan. Southwestern Japan. I've also gone to Tokyo and a few other cities this past January, part of the Kakehashi or bridge building program with the University of San Francisco. The baseball hat you see me wearing is actually a really fun, it's called, I think, Samurai Age. They do this thing where they have the baseball cap with the samurai kabuto. So kind of Japanese baseball meets samurai. It's an interesting, very Japanese memento. So we're going to be talking about my experiences in Japan. Sometimes the good decisions I made, sometimes the bad decisions I made. Like trying to feed a pack of deer. Shikasenbei, or deer cookies. Yes, I was attacked by deer. So today, we have a brief overview. We're going to talk about my introduction, about the Kakehashi program, and the 3 Ps. Basically, the things I'd like to cover today include products, policies, and places when it comes to Japan and America. After that, we'll have a brief review and a little Q&A session if we have time. So Kakehashi is this government-sponsored program that we are going to talk about in a minute, but I would like to ask you one thing first, which is there anything more Japanese than sushi? When we think about Japan, one of the first things we often think about is this food. Sushi, sashimi, sake, all of these very, very Japanese things. But actually, Japanese sushi is a Japanese food, but the things that make up sushi come from all over the world. So when we talk about things like sashimi or sushi, we have to remember that it is not just a Japanese thing, it is a product of international trade. It comes from places other than Japan. It's just been put into a Japanese configuration, a Japanese iteration. So this is a Japanese thing using things that actually might be fairly familiar. And much of that seafood comes through Tsukiji Fish Market in Tokyo. And quoting a really great book by Theodore Bester, he says that the world's largest marketplace for fresh, frozen, and processed seafood. And that's the big thing in his book that he talks about how you get yellowfin tuna from South America. You might get oysters or clams from the Caribbean or from Maine. You'll get lobster from Siberia. All of these different places. It's not just Japanese, as if there is a Japanese fish market with Japanese fish only grown and eaten and traded by Japanese people. It is the product of an international world. The other thing to remember is that this Japanese thing is affected by trade policies, by global conditions, by the relationships between Japan, America, Japan, and the rest of the world. So it is, again, a Japanese product, a local product to Japan with a global connection or a global set of consequences. So talking about Kakehashi really quickly. Kakehashi is a government program. It aims to promote deeper mutual understanding among the people of Japan and the United States, enable future leaders of Japan-US exchanges to form networks, and help young people develop wider perspectives to encourage active roles at the global level in the future. Again, this is a government-sponsored program, so this was very competitive. We were very lucky to get in. Our program at USF was the first graduate school to go. We also went with UC Boulder, we went with Yale, we went with UC Berkeley, we went with Carthage, a lot of high-end Ivy League schools, a very set of prestigious schools. We were the only graduate program to be a part of this, so we were very, very fortunate and very appreciative. The big thing though, unlike my trip to Hiroshima in 2012, this was sponsored by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. So this was a government-sponsored program. That was an all-expense-paid trip. I literally just had to show up and put myself on the plane. Completely everything paid for. My hotel, my airfare, everything. So that was very generous, and we were very, very fortunate. During Kakehashi, participants spend approximately 10 days visiting various cities, observing culture and history, and business and politics. At the end of this process, each delegation was asked to provide 3 people to present a 10 to 15 minute summary of our findings. At the end of that, 6 months later, we're asked to provide a survey with our findings and what we're doing. So this you can think of as part of my work, is that after going to Japan, after being a part of that 3-person team that presented to the Japanese Ministry of Foreign Affairs, we took a 6-month survey, and then we're kind of just left to our own devices. And so this is part of my own work and part of my greater work as a graduate student. So we're also going to intersperse this presentation with slides. As we were leaving Tokyo, which is where we spent most of our time, we did get a shot of Mount Fuji in the distance. Very pretty, very nice, sunny, cool day in Japan. Unfortunately, on our way back, it would be covered in snow. And the bullet train, which usually goes very, very fast, went very not so fast. So that was an interesting trip, seeing how much faster you went on the way down than coming back. And kind of to give you a visual idea of where I actually went, these are the 4 major cities in red that I visited. The one in green is Hiroshima. So from right to left, Tokyo, Nara, Osaka, and Kobe were the 4 major cities. And to give you a better idea, you can kind of see to the right again, there's Tokyo. It's up there kind of in the center of the city, or center of the country on the Kanto Plain. And then down here to the kind of the south, Nara, Osaka, and Kobe. Osaka is a very important companion to much of Japanese history for Tokyo. It was kind of the 2nd major city during the modern period. And historically, it was a merchant city. So for those of you who might not know a lot about these towns, Kobe is where we spent most of our time. If any of you know Kobe beef, a very expensive, very delicious product, that is probably what Kobe is most famous for. It's also a port city. So one of the things that we really kind of came to realize is that this is a farm town in a way. It's out in the middle of the countryside, but it's this thriving port city. It's kind of this combination, again, of rural and urban, which is something that I think a lot of students, when they first learn about Japan or they first go to Japan, they think, oh, it's ancient rice fields, it's these green rice fields, or it's neon-soaked cities. It's Ghost in the Shell, it's Blade Runner, it's whatever fantasy sci-fi movie you can think of. That's Tokyo. To a degree, it is, but that's also not what all Japan is either. So it was really an eye-opening experience to really talk about this idea of a mixture between urban and rural. Just like Sacramento is not just a farm town, we have a government sector, we have a thriving business area, we have a rural component to our city. So that was Kobe. Osaka, like I said, was an important hub for merchants from past to present. It was kind of a merchant town. And when you kind of talk about Tokyo or Osaka, they'll talk about the different dialects that people will speak. People who are from Osaka or from the south tend to have a different dialect, a different regional accent than people from the north. In Osaka, one of the things we did is we visited Daikin, which is an international AC manufacturer. And we saw some really interesting things they were doing with adapting AC units to local conditions. So just like if I bought a heater in Siberia, that would be very different than a heater in Dubai. Probably wouldn't need a heater in Dubai. An AC unit in Alabama is going to have different needs than an AC unit in the Southwest. One's dealing with humidity, one's dealing with drier conditions. And so one of the things we learned about this air conditioning manufacturing company is that they had to adapt their product to local conditions. They can't sell the same thing they sell in Japan to people in Africa, not a country, in the Middle East, in China even. There are different needs. The other two cities we were really in were Nara, which was the historical city, if you remember that picture of me with the pack of deer. This was at Nara, which is a very important historical site. Nara and Kyoto were kind of the two historical monument cities that are left in Japan that have a lot of historical value. And we spent about 2 days in Nara. But most of our time was spent in Kobe and the area around it. And of course, we spent some time in Tokyo, which is Japan's capital city. We visited the Japanese government and the districts of Akihabara and Asakusa. And that, of course, is always the really fun part because you get to go shopping, you get to see all the neon lights, you get to get lost in the subway tunnels. Because one of the things that I also realized going back the second time to Japan is I still don't know how to read Japanese well enough to figure out how to use the subway. And when you go to the first floor, when you go down one level, there are terminals there to get onto subways on that floor. If you go down a second level but bought your ticket on the first level, your ticket will not work on the second floor. So it's one of those things that I got to learn very quickly what it's like to not really understand or be able to speak the language very well in another country. And that was one of the big things that was very important to me was realizing coming back to America that maybe I should be a little bit more patient with people who don't speak English so well. Maybe I should be a little bit more patient with myself when I'm learning a new language. It is very complicated, and it was something that I kind of appreciated to be gently reminded about. So again, kind of the 4 cities we visited were Kobe, Osaka, Nara, and Tokyo. Outside of Kobe, there is this beautiful little sleepy town up in the mountains as you're going down through some of the tunnels and up through the other side of the mountain, because literally it's Kobe mountain town. About a 20-minute drive in some cases through some of these tunnels, especially in places like Hiroshima. But when we went to Arima, it was this hot springs resort town. So if you think about Old Sacramento or Apple Hill or one of these like little quaint tourist attractions, literally on the side of a mountain. And that was kind of Arima. The thing that was really interesting though is that this place still makes traditional baskets. They still make traditional bamboo hand-woven baskets, which was kind of crazy because again, we think, oh, Japan is cell phones, Japan is cars and robots and all of these things that are not typically considered old. And instead, we find that it's not just Sony PlayStations and Nintendos. There are still these traditional arts that are surviving. Notice the toolbox and the air conditioning over his shoulder on the cabinet. So it was a very traditional looking shop with very modern elements combined with it and integrated. So kind of talking about products. That's that first topic, the 3 Ps we're going to cover tonight. Products, policies, and places. With products, the thing that we came to realize is that from air conditioners to fish paste, to bamboo baskets and Honda Accords, Japanese goods and services can be found worldwide in many different configurations and in many different forms. The most successful products are products that have been tailored to their markets. But as markets change, Japanese companies look for new ones. And that's one of the things we will talk about here in a second. One of those companies, I believe, is called Kanotetsu, and they're this traditional Japanese fish paste company. They make kameboko, they make chikoa, which is like, again, a fish paste. If you've ever had like a California roll from the supermarket, or it has the crab, fake crab, or the surimi, the fish product. That is what they specialize in. And one of the problems is that they realized this is a product that my grandparents would eat, my aunt and uncle would eat. This is not something that I would eat if I were a Japanese person. Kind of like if you look at companies like Sears here locally, if you look at businesses here that struggle to become relevant, that you go, oh, my parents shop there. These are companies that don't succeed because they have not adapted to their consumer base. They have not adapted or changed as the market's changed. Amazon is about to open up a second headquarters here in the United States. Sears is going through, I think, its 12th straight year of economic decline and problems because it cannot get its act together. Much like the last semester of college or the last week before finals, if you haven't been doing your homework, if you haven't been paying attention, you can't actually do very well in the marketplace or in the classroom. So part of that solution came from the outside. One of the things this Japanese company in Kobe did is they relied on new markets. They ended up looking outside of Japan because that was the way they were going to survive. They had to think outside the box. So here we actually spent some time at Kanatetsu in Kobe, and what she's showing us is there's literally like these dowels, these wooden like rollers, if you will, if you ever think about rolling a piece of dough. And what we had to do was take fish paste, put it on the table, use like a rubber mat that was cut out for this particular shape, flatten it. So think about like if you're making a cake, you smooth out icing or you smooth out materials. We had to smooth this fish paste in a very particular way. Once you did that, and you can see the cutout at the bottom of the table where she's at, you had to take a second scraper or a knife and gently roll the fish paste, the product, onto that dowel. Once you did that, it was then baked and cured. And that's how it was sold, that was how it was eaten. I didn't have the best time doing this, mostly because I was wearing about size 6 hard rubber Crocs, and I have size 14 feet. So I spent about 2-3 hours walking around with feet this big and shoes this big. So that was a little bit interesting. Let's see here. So yeah, they operate in Southeast Asia, and that's one of the ways they found new marketplaces. And again, you might have seen this before. This is a new line that they just started looking at Japanese newspaper Asahi Shimbun the other day, and it's almost crabs. They have a whole line of almost seafoods. Almost oysters, almost, yes. And that's not a typo. Christina actually looked at it. She's like, I think you actually misspelled it. I go, no, it's almost seafood. And that is how they market and sell this surimi, this fish protein product, is through this almost crab-like structure or shape. So we've talked about products. We've talked about the things people make. The problem is we also have to talk about the policies, the way they're going to sell these things, the rules in which they can sell or work or trade with other people. Like we've been talking about, things like seafood rely on other countries. They rely on other marketplaces. So Japan depends on good relationships with its neighbors to have effective trade. This includes political policies like the Trans-Pacific Partnership, the TPP, but it also, not just political or business agreements, it also includes environmental agreements. And one of the things we did while we were there, because this was before the president's inauguration, was talk about how Japan at the time was going to maybe continue to work on TPP without the United States, or what would happen in the interim. And obviously, things have changed to a degree since we were there in January. The thing that's really interesting, though, is people seem to think, oh, well, this is a business agreement to favor Japan. Yeah. Just like we have trade policies. We want to have the best policies. We want to be number one. We want to be, America first and have American policies and American trade agreements. Well, it's also going to be, for Japanese people, agreements that favor Japan. So one of the things that we have to remember is we can think about environmental agreements Environmental policies, how can there be some push and pull, some give and some get? It's not a zero-sum game. It's not a either or. It can be a yes both. So these policies will affect who Japan trades with, what they trade, and what they can buy or sell. One of the things that Japan had talked about when we were with the ministry was they were looking at ways to give certain favors to companies that wanted to outsource or develop in developing countries. So places like Southeast Asia, like Myanmar, like Burma, like Laos, like Cambodia, Vietnam, the Marshall Islands, the Pacific Ocean, and all the Pacific Islands there. All of these countries need policies to compete and survive, and some of them can't do it at the same level that we can. Just like I can't come in as a master's student and talk about this sort of material at a master's level or at a graduate level with big complex terms and big complex deep assumptions and assume you're going to follow. It just doesn't work. It's not at the same level, and that's not a good or a bad thing, but that is a matter of let's be reasonable here. Let's work with people on the level with which they can. And that's part of what TPP was about, and going to Japan and talking to ministry officials and government officials, we came to understand this is not just a one-sided, Japan is trying to rob America blind. Japan is trying to do something, inequitable for everybody else. No, Japan is like any other country, trying to do the best it can for its people, just like we try to do the best for ours. And part of that now can come from that push and pull of not just thinking of politics and business, but environmental agreements, which is something, as we watch the news, that's very important today. So by negotiating with our partners, we can trade for cooperation on many levels. Maybe we do have to give something up in a trade policy. Maybe we do give them better terms for importing seafood. Well, hey, maybe you could not dump toxic waste into the ocean at Fukushima. Maybe you could help with carbon emissions. What can we do that can be cooperative, that it can be not just an either-or sort of situation? So I wanted to share this with you because this is my shot from my hotel room in Kobe at the Pearl City Hotel. And while Kobe, like I said, is famous for its delicious and expensive Kobe beef, it's also a maritime trade hub. So if you look to the left, and this is like a panorama shot, so it's a little bit distorted. To the left, those are all the mountains that are literally about 20 minutes maybe from where I am, 30 minutes from where I am. If you think about from here to Davis being mountain, like just boom, let's go through some mountains. Forget the causeway, let's just go through the hills. That's kind of how parts of Japan can be. It's very, very rugged terrain, so a lot of the city in a very small amount of space. And to the right, you can see kind of the orange and the white. You can kind of see the dinosaur-shaped shape over the water. That is the trade hub. And so one of the things that I had to be conscious of is that, yes, this is a maritime trade place. This is a farming community. This is a business community. Hyogo Prefecture, so if you think of prefectures like states or like regions or districts in Canada, the United States, Hyogo has a commodity where it grows black soybeans. And each prefecture in Japan is supposed to have a signature commodity. Some of you might not remember this, but California raisins, California avocados, avocados from Mexico, oranges from Florida. Similar thing here. And part of that comes into branding an identity, branding a product to a place to make them more specialer, if you will. So we've talked about places a lot. And one of the big things that I think some of the students when we were on our program and our cohort and the other cohorts and just working with students in general is that we forget that the Pacific connects Japan. The Pacific is not a wall. It's not a puddle that keeps people away. It is a place just as important as, dry land, whether it's the United States, whether it's Hawaii, whether it's the Marshall Islands, whether it's Tahiti, whether any of these places. It is a place that is a geographic and political space just like anywhere else. And that it connects Japan with the rest of the world, particularly the United States, the South Pacific, and East Asia. But it's also, to remember, just like there are different places internationally, there are different places internally, domestically. It's not just all high-tech Tokyo and ancient rice fields. Places like Kobe integrate the rural, the port city, the urban, the maritime. It's all multiple things in multiple places. And as we were kind of looking at these different spaces and these different locations we went to visit, we realized that people's local lives, our lives here, our lives in Japan, our lives wherever, have ties on a global scale. When I buy something on eBay, it can come from Hong Kong. It can come from Britain. It can come from any number of places. So the big thing that I wanted to emphasize, and one of my colleagues kind of came up with this term, and we've seen it a couple times now since then, is think glocal. Local spaces, global impact. It's not just about us versus them. It's not just about me and you. It's about us cohesively. It's about us on many different layers and many different meanings. Just like we think of myself, my friends, my family, my class, my school, these are all different parts of the same whole. So we've been talking about the 3 Ps: products, policies, places. But what do they have in common? It should be obvious by this point to some people. It might not be obvious to everyone. And it has one thing in common: people. People buy products. People make products. People make policies. People break policies, follow policies. People live in places, and they travel between places. Going back to Arima, to that basket weaver shop, this was really cool because my friend Leif, who is a veteran, he was a former, I think, a corpsman. He was like an emergency medic in the Army. He also happened to be a self-described farm boy back from the Midwest. And his family owned a woodworking business. For generations, his father and his grandfather and his family have handmade these wooden bowls and these other different wooden things. So he had this really cool moment where he got to make a connection with this master craftsman of the bamboo weaving shop. And unfortunately, I don't have the video to show you because it's long and it's out of respect for the program. I don't know that I have permission to show it. He spends about 10 minutes, presenting the bowl, and they're talking about it, but he's showing and they're comparing their hands, the scars and the cuts and the dings that happen from working with saws and tools, and just how, just a lifetime of working with your hands is not something that's just understood by Americans. It's not just understood by blue-collar people. It's understood by people over the world. And it's a human connection that was really important to make, because I'm sure they didn't have this moment when the next delegation would come in and speak with him. It's just a, hey, how you doing? Here's how you make baskets. Have a nice day. It was one of the really important things that when we went that I wanted to make sure I captured moments like this. It's really easy to go into a museum, to go into a field trip, and just be like, oh my God, I don't want to be here. I want to do this thing. But when there's a person involved, when you're talking to another person, when you're making that connection and you realize, like I did when I went to Hiroshima, that there was a human being here. There are human beings that are still here. And they have stories, they have needs, they have love, they have fears, they have all of the things that I can relate to, just in a different way, maybe in a different language, but that there's a connection that we can make that ultimately transcends the things we don't understand. There are still things that we can understand about each other. And so that was really cool. And I'm not sure that they really kept in touch after this, but I know they did trade information. And it was something very, very nice because he presented something from his grandfather's collection to this craftsman. So again, to harp on the point one more time, people make the difference. People occupy places. They buy products and they make policies. Yes, Japan needs strong trade policies. Well, we need strong environmental protections. I don't know if you have been paying attention, but there was Hurricane Harvey. There's Hurricane, I think it's Irma, that if I'm correct, it's a 400-mile diameter hurricane, which is the length of Florida. Hurricane bigger than the state of Florida. Southeast Asia, like 1,000 dead or 100 dead, something like that, just 2,500. Yeah, and Bangladesh. So these are things that we can't, they're not trade policies anymore. This is like, guys, we are literally going to be living under 12 feet of water pretty soon if we don't make connections and make accommodations and make a better effort to understand about the things that are really important. Programs like the TPP, which I don't personally endorse, but I can understand why they're doing that, can create a cooperative network and a cooperative framework for this trade. International trades helps companies, no, that's a typo, helps companies and countries survive and grow. Environmental policies will affect more than just one country, and that's the big thing. And that was the thing that we kind of, I think, took out of this visit, is a lot of students just went, in Tokyo, we learned about the Japanese-made cafes that you can go to and get your photo taken. In Nagano, we learned about Tokyo and how they're making trade policies with Toyota. It doesn't matter. This idea of just a book report to Japan and how they're just learning about a tour and taking that information away. And I think that's the thing that I hope I'm able to share with you today and make clear, is this is an application, understanding, but then connecting. And that's a big deal, that without the experience, the theory can only take you so far, can only do so much. So what's next? Well, build awareness. Kind of our three ideas came from, first, building awareness, reflecting upon and realizing how we are actually connected. 2, make those connections and maintain those connections. Discover new solutions and perspectives. Find the human element. This is not just something abstract. There is a person involved. There are consequences to those people's lives when we make policy decisions. Maintain and build a bridge of friendship through this advocacy. So again, those 3 connections that I kind of made at our program was, 1, building the awareness, creating and maintaining the connections, and maintaining and building a sense of advocacy. One of the things I've always appreciated with Christina when she would teach her classes was, anything you learn in school, any program that you're in, you can make it apply to something you care about. I don't care what it is. I don't care if it's math, I don't care if it's gerontology, I don't care if it's history. Anything can be applied to your passion. And that's the most important thing that I took out of this program. And even with Bob, who's in the back, I haven't forgotten about you. We talk about stories, we talk about narratives, we talk about these ideas about, who am I? Why am I here? Where did I come from? Where am I going? That's part of what I'm trying to get across, and I think I'm succeeding for the most part, is we need to realize that education empowers. The motto of my school, of USF, is change the world from here. So hopefully, I'm helping you realize, or maybe make connections or appreciate opportunities that may come up. Because the only reason I went to Japan the first time was I had a professor who said, hey, here's a thing you should look at. And I applied and went. And I got to hang out in Japan on vacation for 2 weeks, basically. And I got a semester's worth of credit. So I think it's a great opportunity to talk about what study abroad can do for you, what study abroad can do for your education, what it can do for people in general. So that's kind of my main spiel for the day. I do want to go through some more photos just to share kind of more about what we did in our visit to Japan. So it's crazy. If you've never been out of the country or even out of the state, I had to literally get up at 3 or 4 in the morning, drive to Sacramento Airport, from Sacramento, fly to San Francisco, get out, go back through customs again, wait around, get another airplane, fly from San Francisco all the way to Narita. So I think by the time I was done, I had been awake for about 25 hours, and I was pretty loopy. So thankfully, they put us to bed, and they got us up bright and early around 7 o'clock in the morning, hustled us onto shuttles, and got us to the ministry. So I just wanted to kind of show you this, that it actually looks kind of like this room, in a way. This was one of the government rooms that they had available to us. We were not allowed to take many pictures at the ministry. This was one of them. And this is how the front of it looks. This was just our, our first round of lectures happened here with the ministry, with Honda, the company that makes the Honda Accord and other cars. But it's a lot of business stuff. It's very, very dry. So I wanted to share with you something that I thought everyone would be interested in, considering it's the noontime hour, which is food. This was our first lunch. And I thought this was just kind of interesting that it was a hamburger patty with brown gravy, with spaghetti noodles, with coleslaw, Thousand Island dressing, a slice of tomato, and a scoop of macaroni salad. So an interesting take on an American dish in Japan. This was the first meal we had when we first came to the airport, or from the airport to the hotel the first night we were there, was actually this really interesting steam box meal. So it was this big black, like a See's candy box, that you pulled a cord, you waited 10 to 12 minutes, and it had like one of those heat packs that you can sometimes get for an injury. That's basically how dinner was made. You just left it alone, a little steam came out, and you had a whole cooked meal with salad, it looks like. There was the 3 kinds of rice. Looks like there was plain white. I think there was brown with a couple of soybeans in it, possibly. I was really tired. I can't remember taking this photo. It looks like there was tamago or egg in the bottom right. And then there were 2 different pieces of fish. I think this was salmon. And then I'm not sure. I think that might have been chicken up on the top. But I remember I ate that. I walked downstairs, went across the street to the Lawson's, which is kind of like a 7-Eleven, and bought macadamia nut ice cream at about 3 in the morning, because I was now awake, having switched my time clock. The other thing I wanted to show you, though, was something also familiar but different, which was the Big Mac. Yeah. And it was funny, because I had eaten a Big Mac the first time when I had been in Osaka in 2012. And of course, all my friends were like, oh my God, it's so much different. It's so different. Japanese McDonald's is better than American McDonald's. And I was like, no, it's the same thing. But actually, I do think there were some differences when I went and tried it this time. The seasoning was a little different. It tasted a little bit different. So it was interesting to just think about, here's this American thing that's been domesticated or localized to a different set of tastes. The fries were, as I remembered, the Coke was still delicious. The burger slightly different, but it was really, really good. And it was nice because while we're there, they're shuttling you through. Here's this meeting. Get on the bus. Go to this meeting. Here's another stop. Take 10 minutes. Go to the shopping arcade. Go to this mall. Hang out for an hour. Get back on the bus. And as we're doing all of this, they're just hustling us through preset stops at restaurants. So I ate a lot of karaage. I ate a lot of Japanese fried chicken by the time I was done. And after about the 6th time of eating Japanese fried chicken in 3 days, I was happy to have a Big Mac. I was happy to have a chance to escape to a Lawson's or a 7-Eleven. So this trip was a barrel of fun, and I really do appreciate you guys taking time out of your day to come and listen to what I have to say. And if you have any questions, please feel free to stand around and talk to me afterwards, or email me. So thank you guys so very, very much for being a part of our panel today.